Testing. Yeah, it's working. Good evening. Welcome to the January 8th Victoria City Council meeting. Mayor Funk is ill this evening, so I will be Mayor Pro Tem. We will proceed. First item on the agenda is to say the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Second item is to adopt the revised agenda. Can I have a motion to adopt the revised agenda?
I'll make a motion to adopt the revised agenda.
Do I hear a second? Second. Any discussion? Approved. No?
I think we have to vote on that, I'm sorry.
Oh,
All in favor?
yes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All against, nay. Approved. Third item on the agenda is open forum. We have one request to speak at the council meeting, Mr. David Ricks.
Hi, my name is David Ricks, and thanks for letting me speak early this evening on the agenda topic regarding the Arboretum Way site. I'm a resident at 728 Oak Court, and that Oak Court kind of borders up to the Bavaria and 18 intersection. And I've been in contact with the county on this a little bit, but was also interested in the city's opinion due to Chaska's submitting an opinion as well. And I did have some concerns, specifically as a resident, not only due to my location to the site, but just overall in general. Specifically, safety reasons. I know living by that intersection, driving by it every day, it's very busy. There's a dirt road there, and I know looking at some of the projections for car use and times, specifically around, I guess it would be rush hour times and early Saturday morning rush hour times, just wondering how much study the county's really done on this, not only because it's based on current projections, but what happens when variables change in terms of, what happens when more homes are built down in Bavaria, what happens when we incur more growth here in the city, which is great, but is this really the most appropriate site? Mainly because the intersection just isn't up to date. There's no turn lanes. There's already enough, close calls, I would say, on a daily basis, especially in the winter. It just depends on how patient the drivers are and so forth. So I think my biggest concern is safety, not only for my neighbors and my fellow residents, but also for my family. I have a young family here, and I drive that every day. So I'll be driving that a lot during the week when they're having drop-off. Saturday mornings probably as well. So I guess my second concern is really, is this the appropriate site for the land of use? It seems to me like this is a site that's really benefiting the Arboretum and the county from a cost perspective, and I think Arboretum seems to want to have a kind of an available site that maybe it's covered. I don't know what their financial interests are, but I think it's important that the city here, take in consideration. I know you don't have a lot of power in decision making here, but I think this is an issue that impacts the residents and so forth. And I think it's an intersection that's going to come up more in the future in terms of safety and growth. I really think, potentially there's just a better site along the county for this. Carver County is a big county. There's a lot of open space. There's a lot of industrial land, non-residential site. There's a lot of homes that are currently in the area. And who knows what will happen with the farms in the area. Some of the businesses, in terms, maybe that land will turn over to homes. I don't know. But I think there's some considerations to take in terms of safety and both that and of land use. And again, I know the city doesn't have a lot of control here, but I think it would be great if you could take maybe considerations of safety and proper location of this site into consideration and formulate an opinion and communicate that with the county, so the county has an idea of what impact this is really going to have to residents, just not just in terms of safety and use, but just livability. I mean, there's a lot of families if you drive over there. I don't know if you guys drive over there a lot, but we have homes on Out Court, and there's a lot of young families with kids, and it's a safety issue. I think potentially a safety issue if there's backups on the road and so forth. So I guess my ask is just take into careful consideration the project and how that might impact the residents here in Victoria. And I know that there was a letter formulated, and I really do appreciate all your consideration on that. And any communication you can have with the county representing Victoria residents, especially those directly impacted, like my family and neighbors, in terms of the volume of traffic and so forth, would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you for writing this weekend, too.
No problem. Well, thanks for responding so quickly. I do appreciate it.
We will we will be discussing this subject later on item 8A on the agenda. So the next item of business is the organizational items. The first one, we have staff report.
Your Honor, I'll take that.
Sure.
This is an annual appointment that we do every year. We're going to be appointing the mayor pro tem. We're going to be setting the official newspaper for the city, the official calendar, the official depositories, institutions. The person to handle, the finance director, will be handling the data practice request. And then there are council committees, a finance committee, and a park and rec committee, which before you do the resolution, you should decide who would be the person on the finance committee and who would be on the park and rec. There are two people that listed as being interested to be on the finance committee. So my recommendation would be that you make that decision first by motion, and then you come back and adopt the resolution approving all of these things I just listed.
Okay. Since I wasn't prepared for this, do we have a...
Well, I can speak to that because I was one of the people who...
Okay, I think the two people that are interested are you,
and Tom
Councilman
Gregory.
Striegel and Councilman
Right.
Gregory.
And I had indicated to the city manager that I would be happy to leave that open to Councilmember Gregory. I think it's critical to get a deep understanding of the finances as early on in your term as possible. So I'm happy to cede that position to you.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to. I've got a lot to learn, and more than eager to dig in. I know there's good people on there with Kelly and Greg, especially Greg Vansky's been on there understanding since 2009, I believe. So we've got some good people on there, and I think I could get a good education. I would appreciate that opportunity.
I think this is effective in March. Is that I think
it's immediate, isn't it?
I think it's immediate. I think
For
this
the
is
council
all.
members' participation, it's immediate, yes.
Yeah, okay.
The citizen representatives, it is.
Okay, March, all right, very good. So we need a motion to approve.
If we do the other ones all together, is that
I
right?
think you can do it all.
All right.
I assume one council member is dropping out, so you just have one for that
Okay,
position.
so we have,
So you need one motion for the resolution.
okay,
What about Mayor Pro Tem?
so basically, we're going to
That's
do
true.
all of the positions and then agree on individuals and then make one motion.
Well, I think whoever makes a motion, if they simply state who they want to be in the finance committee and who they want to be for the mayor pro tem, that would work.
I will make a motion that we approve, what do we call this? We're really organizing. Resolution relating to the organizational annual appointments for the city of Victoria for 2018 with Councilmember Gregory as the liaison to the finance committee and Councilmember Vogt continuing as mayor pro tem.
Liaison to the finance.
And Councilmember, excuse me, what did I say?
I think planning.
I'm sorry.
Unless I heard wrong.
Finance committee.
Okay.
Excuse
I
me.
have a point of discussion.
Sorry.
Point of discussion is that there's also a representative for the Parks and Rec Committee.
Oh.
And that would be me. So I'm interested in being on the Parks and Rec Committee. So,
And I will amend my motion to include Councilmember Vogt as the liaison to the Park and Rec Committee. And do we have one left with the Planning Commission, and that be Mr. Striegel, or are we leaving that open right now?
I think we've had no representative with the Planning Commission for a period of years. Is that, so?
My understanding, it's an independent body, and
Yep.
Yeah, it exists by statute, and whenever we've had need for interaction, they come to council and present. So I'm comfortable leaving that vacant, and I would second the motion.
Okay,
I was gonna
so
say,
we have
do
a
I need to
motion.
restate it after that, or should we go?
So we have a motion to approve Councilman Gregory for the Finance Committee, Councilman Vogt for Mayor Pro Tem, Councilman Vogt for Parks and Rec. Was there anybody else?
That was correct. That's what I seconded.
Okay. All those in favor?
I,
Aye.
All those against? Motion carries.
Mayor, acting mayor, just to be clear,
Yeah.
for purposes of the record, so that was a motion to adopt the resolution with those positions filled in it. There are other things covered by the resolution, but I
Okay.
think you just voted to adopt the resolution. Do we agree on that?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
I guess before we move on from that, if I thought we were going to break it into pieces, and I would like to discuss the official city newspaper and
As far as I'm concerned, that we didn't do that, so we should discuss it and make a motion
okay.
for the official city newspaper.
That was part of
That was part of
Was
it.
that part of it?
Yes. It was part of the motion.
Wasn't part of the detail,
It's in the resolution. If you look at the resolution,
okay?
in there.
Organizational and annual appointments for the city of Victoria, which is included in this.
Resolution covers the acting mayor, the economic development director
Yes.
authority, the newspaper, the council meetings, schedule.
We can still have a
Yeah,
discussion.
let me
Newspaper, yeah.
let me make a statement, and then we can decide whether we want to rescind that and make a new motion. So historically, the main reason for maintaining the Chanhassen Villager as the newspaper record has been that it's lower cost than the Star Tribune, which is the only other legal option. And I see the numbers in here for Southwest Media, Chan Villager, and I see there's a 3% cost increase, but I don't know what we're comparing that against. And I think there have been some significant concerns with the reliability and, I guess, impartiality of the Villager in the past year in particular. And, probably kind of the breaking point for me was when they intentionally and knowingly reworded a resident's statement, changing its meaning substantially without permission and still attributing it to that resident. And when I attempted to speak to them about it, they said they were doing him a favor and, defended that practice. And to me, that's, somebody who's a first-year journalism student, and their eyes got very large at that idea that would actually be acceptable in any legitimate newspaper. So I'd like to see the numbers. I'd like to understand. But if we have to make a motion tonight, my main question then becomes, are we obligated for all of 2018 if we approve this motion tonight, or can we look at the numbers and come back and, with a vote of the council, make a change at a future date?
Mr. Mayor, I think you can delete them from the resolution tonight if you wanted to, but I want you to make a separate motion that would continue them as your official newspaper until the next meeting so that we have one until you make a decision.
Just to further this discussion, the reason the Chanhassen Villager was chosen for the official city paper was because it was weekly? Is that, what is the primary reason we don't use the Gazette as the official newspaper?
Sure. Yeah, so acting mayor and council members, there are actually statutory criteria. State law sets out the criteria for a paper, a local paper, to be eligible to be an official newspaper. If I tried to recite all of the criteria, I would get something wrong, so I'm not going to try and do that. But yes, the frequency of the publication is one of the criteria, and as I understand it, from prior investigation by this city, the two that are eligible that you've got are the Chan Villager and the Strib, based on that criteria, and I think others. So I don't know if that's changed, if there's any others, or if either of those two is now not eligible. I suppose if you wanted to look into the Strib, you could make sure that you have me or have Doug look into making sure that the Strib is eligible, and I'm certain that they are, but you'd want to confirm that they are eligible to be an official paper and get their pricing, if that's what the will of the majority is.
So do we have to change the motion that we just approved to investigate that, or we could make a change at a future date?
Yeah, no, acting mayor and council members, I agree with your interim city manager. It's important that you at all times have a designated official paper. You may have to publish a notice on relatively short notice. And so it's important that you have an official paper at all times. So I think what you've done here tonight to re-up with the Chan Villager is fine. There is no limitation on your ability to switch in a month or 3 or 6. You could simply make a motion to do that. And if that were passed, you would have then switched official publications.
So in other words, the motion that we made could stand until we want to change it at a later date.
I guess with that said, I don't have any objection then to leaving the motion stand. The other attributes of this motion include official depositories and institutions and data practices, and so though I don't have take any issue with any of those points, so from my perspective it can stand as is.
Okay, the motion stands as is.
Does the council want me to bring that back then and get the numbers?
Yes, please.
I think so. And we have a yearly meeting spreadsheet. Is that true? So by way of, was this published on the website so that
Yes.
it is? Okay.
Yes. So you've adopted your normal schedule is the second and fourth, the first and third, second and fourth Mondays, but you made some modifications because of several holidays during the year.
And that was all part of our motion that
That's
was
in the
just
motion
adopted.
All
already.
part of
So
it.
we're all done with
Yeah,
You are.
so,
item 4.
yep.
So anybody who's interested in finding out what the schedule is for the year ahead can look on the city website and see all of the regularly scheduled meetings throughout 2018.
Next item is the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move we approve the consent agenda, but I don't want to pull an item, I just would like to make a note of it and discuss it.
All right. Why don't we have that discussion right now? Wait a second.
I just made I noticed in the claims roster, there was expense to redesign the website. I was just curious to understand more about that.
Kelly.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. A few years ago, we switched over to a new website company, Civic Plus, and as part of that, we actually got a free website makeover. But as part of that, we wanted to continue to keep our website fresh and updated. So what we've been doing is prepaying for a redo of that website. So the amount in there represents a portion of the prepayment to upgrade that website, and I believe it's 2019 that will actually occur. So
Do you know at this point what the upgrades will be or what the total expense is related to that?
it's been $4,000 a year for 3 years, so it's either $12,000 or $16,000 for the total. I don't know if it's a 3 or 4 year, and that'll be a complete overhaul, complete redesign of the website.
I guess I was unaware that this expense had been accruing for the last few years. Can we get kind of an update at the next meeting or a future meeting as to what's included in that? Just, I think it's
In the annual payment?
actually in the planned upgrade. I just think it's
Sure.
good information for the residents to know how this important communication tool will be enhanced to continue serving.
Can I have a second, thank you. Can I have a second motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll second it.
All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
All those against, motion carries. Reports of the city manager.
We have
No,
We've
go on the other
finished.
side.
Yeah,
number 7.
Trying to skip over me.
Meeting adjourned.
I'm with you. Okay, new business. First item on new business is 6355 Bay Cliff reimbursement request.
Kara.
That's me.
That's Kara.
Unfinished, or this is unfinished business.
Mayor and council, this agenda item was continued from the December 11th city council meeting. At that meeting, the city council had tabled action on that meeting on this item until this meeting. And so it is on the agenda for you again tonight. Just by way of reminder, the residents who are in attendance this evening are requesting reimbursement from the city of $90,250 for for work completed on their property. That itemization was included in your staff report. As previously noted, 2 outside firms had reviewed the issues being raised by the residents and concluded that the road improvements completed in the Bay Cliff neighborhood did not cause the increased flooding on their property. And so, as the agenda statement said last time, the council should discuss the residents' request. The city council had requested information from the city attorney on this item, which was provided to the city council under separate cover. That's all I have.
So do we have any discussion by the council?
Yeah, I guess just from my perspective, I did take an opportunity to go out to the property. I can understand the engineering report where there isn't more water going onto their property, but based on my observations, and I'm certainly not an engineer, but there's a couple of things I noted. That first of all, the property itself, I think, does have some challenges from its location. It is much lower than the road. I forget which roads were these roads. The name of these roads, but Bay Cliff Drive. So it is. So elevation standpoint, it is much lower. And then prior to the street improvements, the water that did go onto the property was dispersed throughout Bay Cliff, through their whole frontage. And then after the road construction, the curb and gutter system, and then the water drainage from the road coming in from north and south, kind of gets funneled right to one separate area. So it may not increase the amount of water, but it certainly channels it and increases the collection point and the velocity of the water that does come onto their property, and channels it onto one specific area. And I can see where it could have created some issues.
So I want a clarification. Were the engineering opinions that regarding the amount of water that came onto the property, or were the engineering opinions related to responsibility for the flooding?
Essentially, and I'm going to just not put words in their mouth, so I will head back to their items. So I'm going to go back to the WENC review first. So essentially, WENC concurred with the findings of the hydromethod review that the city road reconstruction project did not exacerbate flooding on 6355. The hydromethod's memo is much longer in detail, and I believe that this one, but essentially included that there was a, I just want to find the part in their memo. So essentially that the increase in runoff to the property was, they defined it as a 1.8% increase, so relatively small. And that a 1.8% increase would have a negligible impact on the high water level of the depression, the low area in their backyard.
So that just does refer to just the amount of water overall, but it doesn't take into account the channeling effect and the direction of the water and the flow and the velocity of the water?
Kira?
Is that a question?
Yes.
Well, I thought it was a statement.
Well, I guess it was a question. Okay, so the 1.8 they're referring to as being negligible. I don't think the issue is there's more water going on their property. I think the issue is that it's being channeled, and then once it's channeled to that one spot, the velocity of the water and the force of it is what's causing the issues. It's not necessarily a change in the amount of water, it's just the change in the force and the velocity of the water.
I still have the same question I had the last time we discussed it. Had the city put in this storm sewer in the first place, would this have happened? Would this have likely been not an issue?
Their rear yard is still a low area that collects drainage. They wouldn't be able to be saying that we've changed the flow of water to their property if there was a storm sewer system in place to collect it. I did go back and give some look at the possibility of how feasible it would have been to add a storm sewer in the first place, and there are some challenges in the area with the sanitary sewer line that's running through it, so it's difficult to predict whether we would have made a different decision with a different set of information back in 2008 when the project was first contemplated, but yeah.
Based on hindsight, if we did the storm sewer today, would it help?
The water that's draining from the road to their low area wouldn't be draining from the road to the low area anymore had we installed a storm sewer system from this intersection up to the intersection of Bay Cliff and Orchid.
You cut right to
So that would have been a significant reduction in the amount of water reaching the property from before you're capturing it all essentially at that point, correct?
Well, there's a fairly, I don't think I have that note here. We would just be collecting a portion of this drainage area. So really, this part here would have been collected in a storm sewer and brought to this intersection and then discharged out, provided that we could have physically installed a storm sewer in that area and had it permitted. But
Is most of the erosion occurring to the west of that driveway?
it might be appropriate for the property owners to speak to that.
Hi, yes.
Please
In
state
answer
your
to your
name,
question,
name and address.
yes.
Chandler.
And Terry Carlson, 6355 Bay Cliff Drive.
Thank you.
Yes, most of the erosion was to the west, and it was also to the south. As you stated, the amount of water and then the velocity of the water, we had first put in a smaller drainage area to it, and it totally overran it. And so we had to put in a much larger and actually dig it down so it almost makes a little pool area in order to collect all the water, and then there's a culvert that goes into a drainage ditch that takes it out. So that is the water we're talking about. We understand, and some of the engineer's report that's in here talks about the other
improvements, the driveway and things that we needed to do because of the water that's coming onto the property and because it's the best way to handle it. So a good portion of what he's talking about are the effects afterwards. And yes, we knew that we were creating more impermeable surfaces, so we had handled that. We're just talking strictly about the water that's coming off the street and is channeled into that one area that we have to then direct. And it is a large volume of water. It's an acre, 0.3 of water that is now channeled onto that particular area.
And that's just right west of your driveway.
Yes.
Well, we had a gravel driveway originally for years and years, class 5, and that was being eroded as well, so.
We had
that's-
to do something.
Yeah, we had to put in something to prevent that as well, so it's been a number of different things we've tried to do to ameliorate the problem that didn't exist before the road changed, and yeah, we strongly feel if there'd been a sewer collection point put up in front of our driveway, we wouldn't be in front of you taking up your valuable
Well,
time.
and we had asked, that was the beginning conversation, was why were we not getting a storm sewer?
That we paid for,
Right.
but never appeared.
What was the answer to that, Kara?
So, storm sewer, as a matter of fact, isn't located in every single street adjacent to every single property. So the proposed improvements were a street and storm sewer improvement project. So overall, within the neighborhood, the project did include storm sewer improvements, and that was included in both the feasibility study and the street project that was eventually approved by the city council.
But as I recall, it wasn't extended quite far as we're talking about right now.
Correct. The storm sewer,
Because of complexity, because of what was in the street.
yeah, I mean, a variety of factors go into designing a storm sewer system. So at the time, it was determined that it wasn't necessary to include it there.
So question on that point, there's been some debate, I think, about whether it was originally planned and then pulled, or whether can you comment on that?
Correct. I reviewed at the last council meeting that I did go back and locate the original feasibility study, and it didn't include an extension of storm sewer to that location, nor was it included in the approved plans that were approved by the city council.
You said didn't include?
It was not included. So what's generally in terms of where storm sewer is located was installed consistent with what had been in the original feasibility report and then the final approvals.
Just what's a ballpark cost if it was to be extended? What would that run?
24,000 was the number you put out there last meeting, last
So-
time we discussed.
And that was just based on the cost of a pipe from this location up to here. The actual construction costs would have been more dependent on the feasibility of putting it in. When you have a sanitary sewer running kind of crisscross across the roadway, the storm sewer system likely would have had to come up for part of the property and then potentially jog, or whether we'd have to look at relocating the sanitary sewer would be something. But the 24,000 was based off of how many feet of distance at a typical cost per foot of storm sewer. That I did it off the top of my head at the last council meeting.
Right.
Yep.
And would that cost be, I'm assuming the cost would be more expensive if we were to go put one in today?
Correct.
I
I would have to do
mean, 10 times?
I'd have
5
to do
times?
an estimate on it to see if we would rip up a brand new road to put it in or try to use directional boring techniques.
So just staring at the map here, thinking about it, if it was run across I guess that would be the north side of the road. Is that the north side or?
Yeah, north is up.
Thank you. Would that, I'm thinking if there's a crown in the road, it's not, would that affect the runoff on the south edge of that road?
Typically what you'll see catch basins installed on both ends of the curb line. So these lines don't drop into this map exactly where they're located, but if you look at any street corner, you'll see catch basins at all locations. So again, I'd have to complete a design on it, but if we were intending to pick this area up by storm sewer, you'd potentially have a catch basin in this location, whether you'd also have one up here, and potentially one here would be something that you'd determine through a design process.
So if there was a storm sewer line installed, it would go from Maple,
No, to Orchid, I think.
Maple.
Maple Ridge.
Maple Ridge.
Yeah,
Yeah, up
Maple
to
Ridge.
Orchid.
Yeah, the nearest storm sewer is located here. So then the other thing you'd be looking at is making sure that the stormwater pond system down in this location and the pipes that are in place are sized appropriately to handle that redirected flow of water. I think they probably would be fine given it's not a very large drainage area. But those are thoughts that would have gone into the initial design back during the feasibility stage. Typically, as a general rule of thumb in street reconstruction projects, we find where the current water is draining to and we don't reroute it. That tends to be a starting point for designers when you're in a reconstructed area. So that water that's flowing generally in one location, we continue to have it discharge in that location. When you start moving it around, can cause problems. But that's just a designer starting point.
So did that occur in this case?
I would imagine so, but we're back in 2008 now in terms of what the design team who was working on it were thinking at the time.
I sort of question that because it's very obvious that, yes, we have a low area, and that had been completely landscaped. We had a patio down there with a pond and a waterfall, and so we were not getting stormwater collecting in there. And because it's an obvious low point, if a designer came out and was focusing the water onto the property, that would have been an obvious red flag to me that there is a low area that is completely landscaped that ended up being basically condemned because you couldn't use it. So, there's a number of things there, and because we were vigilant to try and inform the city that this looks like a mistake that's happening and then did happen, that sort of adds to the consternation for us. So we have, an answer to putting a storm sewer in probably would take care of the problem. However, we have already landscaped the yard and put in the drainage system that is working. And for the amount of money that you would end up putting into the storm sewer, I guess we would prefer to be paid.
Yeah.
So the monies you have spent are working.
Yes.
There's no doubt about it. No question.
No, they've worked for the last 2 summers.
Yeah, it's taken us 2 or 3 years because as we've had some of these real heavy downpours, then we found some things we thought would catch enough water and route enough water were being overflowed. So we had to go back and
Rework them.
redo it to try to get it to accommodate the flow, the volume, the rate, and the flow to get it to go, basically around the house and down through the back, and we had to cut our way through part of a hill to have the flow eventually end up down by Highway 7.
In a pond that was already there.
Well, and I guess that's my concern is that there's $90,000 that's been spent here and really no assurance that that's going to fix the problem. And so I come back to what problem are we trying to solve? The problem that I hear we're trying to solve is runoff. And the solution, from what I'm hearing from the engineer, is to put in a sewer. And now I go back to how do we normally put in sewers? We do it during road construction, and there's a 50% cost to the homeowners. City picks up half, the homeowner picks up half, and we go fix it. And so I come right back to what's the cost to put in to do it right and fix it, if that's what has to be done. And then I start looking at it from a legal standpoint. That I see a demand letter from the city attorney. Can you help me understand legally what does that mean from a risk standpoint to the city and what possible next steps are?
Yeah, so Mayor and Council, without getting into the details of my memo, you have it, and I'm happy to answer questions about it if you want me to do that. But the bottom line of the memo is that I tried to look at theories of liability to the city, given the fact, which is that the facts are that there are 2 engineering reports indicating that the city's project has not materially contributed to the problem these folks are having. Given that fact, my conclusion is there's very little or no liability to the city. I can anticipate the next question then is, well, then why or how could the city make a payment to these folks? I think I would logically move then to, can a city make a payment where there is little or no legal liability to the city, but where a city project could theoretically have eliminated a problem that the city didn't cause, apparently. I mean, that's the advice the city has gotten from 2 engineering firms. Could the city make a payment where the city could have made improvements in its street project that would have reduced or eliminated the problem? I think I probably could get to yes on that. I haven't been asked to look at that, but that's, I think, where you would go. If the city was inclined to look at trying to work something out with these folks, I don't think we're talking about eliminating liability to the city. I presume if we were to do something for these folks, you'd want to get a release of some kind, just because that would be sensible to do. But that wouldn't be the crux or the basis for making that payment from my perspective. I don't see significant liability to the city.
Well, that's where I come back then. To make a decision on this, I really need to understand what the cost could be, what it would have been to put in the sewer the first time, so that we can comparatively understand. If it's 1-to-1, all right, that points me in one direction. If it's significantly more than that, it might point me in another direction.
I think we need to know what it would have cost, or what would cost to put in the storm sewer in this particular location.
So those are 2 different questions, so I'll want clarity on which
Yes.
question I'm answering. So there would have been a cost, so assuming I determined that it was feasible, there would have been a cost associated with extending the storm sewer in the first place. So that would be one set of cost estimate. The second set of cost estimate would be, what would it cost to install a storm sewer today? And those are going to be 2 different things, because we were reconstructing the road then, so the cost to patch the road and fix the road would have been
more expensive today.
correct.
Yes.
Yeah. So I would just want clarity on what the council wants me to estimate.
I would like to understand both.
Had we done it originally, that cost would have been dispersed over the whole project. Is that correct?
Yeah, under the city's assessment policy, 50% of the storm sewer costs were assessed to the property owners.
All homeowners, though.
Correct. Yep.
Right, but based on the individual lot, was it based on footage back then,
Unit basis.
unit basis?
So same way our residential street projects are assessed today. So they all paid the same amount.
I think the footage you referenced earlier was literally the footage of pipe and cost of installation, correct?
Correct.
Frontage on a particular roadway.
Correct. It was just how many feet. I measured while we were sitting here, how far is it from point A to point B?
And I guess I'm thinking that those questions are relevant if there is fault. And I'm really troubled by this kind of from both sides. There's not really a great answer. If the project caused harm and we can show that, then I think there's an obligation to participate in the remedy. If it didn't, it's very difficult for me to say we should spend taxpayer money to be part of the remedy. So I'm not sure at this point with the information we have that I can support making a decision, or at least not one that's favorable to the residents.
I guess I'm confused in the harm piece of it. I mean, we have pictures, we have video. Some of the pictures you've seen, probably not all of the video. As far as the amount of water coming onto the property during a storm, and then what you're going to do with it. It had to be handled. We had to do something because it was eroding the property, and our driveway was right there. So in order to get to our house, we had to do something. we did the best that we could. And I guess the idea of putting in a storm sewer sounds nice, but not if we're going to be assessed more money, 50% for the project after we've already spent this amount of money on the project. Yes, I understand, and we have a hydrologist that came in because civil engineers are very difficult to get out on a small project like this, especially when you're trying to argue with a city who is their bread and butter. And they basically, it was a city engineer, a civil engineer that told me, get a hydrologist and just go straight to the city council with your problems. He says, yeah, this is something that should be handled in here this way, because obviously we've had problems. We wouldn't have done something like this without major issues. And like I say, it condemned the whole area. We had to completely redo that and rip out all the landscaping that had been put in, and we're not coming to you for that.
No, and it's clear that there's been challenges, issues, and the question that we have to answer is, did the city cause that? And that's the part, that as much as
Well, you can come out during a rainstorm and I'll show it to you. Like I say, I have video, I have pictures. All day long, we hear about things that work on paper. Bumblebees shouldn't fly. The engineers say it's impossible. But what they do on paper and what they've said and what the actuality is are two different things. Like I say, I understand Kara went by all of the drawings and what the engineer said. This was not a deliberate thing that she did to us. This is something that was a mistake. But it's a mistake we've had to pay for.
The dilemma the city has is that we've had to reputable engineering firms give us opinions that this did not cause the problem.
I don't know how political that ends up being. I've had a hydrologist that came on and said, no, there's definitely reasons for this problem. And they are because of the way the land was laid out and because of what was done on our property. You have those copies.
So we can debate this back and forth, and
Yep.
we're going to agree to disagree based upon the information that we have right now. What I'm trying to get to a point is where I have enough information and I can make a decision. I don't know what that decision will be. And for me, in order to move forward, I need to understand those two values.
Okay.
So I apologize that my approach here is I'm going to have to table this again. I don't have enough information to make a decision. The one thing that I can tell you right now that I think is wrong is to come up and say, we're going to pay you $90,000. I don't agree with that right now. I don't have the information to justify it. This may give me that information. So what I'm asking for, is it okay with you for us to gather some more information? I need to understand more. That's my personal view of this.
We don't have a choice.
My personal view is similar. The 90,000 includes things that are probably cosmetic, that were very expensive.
I don't think so. We'll get through it
But
later.
it's a lot of money. We're at a standstill here because I think if we understood the storm sewer economics, the economics of the storm sewer would help. But we have a real dilemma.
Are the sorry, were you?
No,
Are the engineers that wrote these reports, are they PEs?
Yes.
So as a professional engineer, licensed engineer, and this is really just to respond to the comment or the question mark about politicizing things. As a licensed professional engineer, they're personally, legally liable for the results of their work. So I think there is a very high level of diligence on their part to make sure that they have, you understand, justifiable conclusions.
I would like you, in your deliberations, I would like you to come out and visit the site,
That's fair.
because I think it becomes quite obvious when you visit the site how things measure up and the crests of the road and how everything, hopefully there won't be too much snow when you decide to visit it. But I think that would help you understand where we're coming from and why we question some of the engineers' calculations.
And then should we be getting you all of the photographs and videos?
I've seen them from
yeah.
the previous meeting.
we see,
Some,
but some,
not as many as we have.
Well, we didn't want to inundate you unnecessarily, but if we need to prove our case by showing you, the engineer says this, and then, you can believe your lying eyes.
Mr. Mayor, This is a tough decision for all of us. I
Yeah,
think
I'm
you
sure.
can see we're struggling with this, and we've heard you speak now a couple of times, and we're still not getting any closer to a solution for you. From what I'm hearing is you're really not interested in a storm sewer, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but
Not if we have to pay
What-
for
what-
Yeah,
it.
we gotta pay more money.
and what you've put in works.
Yes.
Yep.
We can go back and look at numbers, what it would have cost, what it would cost today, and maybe those aren't things that you're even particularly interested in. But if we come up with some of those numbers, I'm proposing the staff kind of take a two-prong approach, not only get those numbers, but also sit down with the Carlsons and just to see if there's a solution, and I'm not going to the $90,000 solution, but somewhere in between 0 and 90 that might work. And I don't know if the council thinks that's a bad idea or not, but I'm willing to throw it out there as a way to try to resolve this once and for all, rather than go back, get numbers. Okay, this is what it would cost to put in a storm sewer, when you're really not interested in getting a storm sewer. But maybe you're more interested in just getting the dollar amount, and then, as Mr. Vos said, signing a waiver that would resolve it. Throw it out there.
So Councilmember Gregory, I understand what you're saying, and I'm trying to gather the information in order to make an assessment on whether or not that's even appropriate.
Right.
So to have them go down that path right now, I think is premature. I don't disagree with the methodology or the approach, but if you want to throw it out on the table and you want to understand all the possibilities here, they could leave tonight, they have a demand letter in front of us, they could sue us. Okay, they could sue us for $90,000 right now. They're not happy with what we're discussing right now, so what I'm seeing, that's a sincere possibility. All right, given that on one end of the equation, and the other end of the equation, us writing a check for $90,000, I don't think either one of those are going to be the appropriate action. All I'm asking for is that we've got to come up with a solution that's mutually agreeable for some decisions that were made before any of us were even on this council. And we're here and we're trying to work with you. We're asking for more time to get more information. That's all we're asking for. Because if you demand tonight a check for $90,000, my answer is no.
Well, I know.
I don't have enough information to give you.
If we treated this with antiseptic gloves, based on the fact we have two engineering opinions and we have legal counsel telling us the opinions would hold, we would just end this right now. But I think we've all expressed a desire to learn more and to think about this a little more. I hate to say we're kicking the can down the road and we're procrastinating, but I don't feel comfortable making a decision tonight. I don't think anyone else does.
And this is not procrastinating. It's trying to get the information to make an informed decision.
We want to do the right thing, but we have to be aware of precedent, because we have two engineering firms that told us we don't need to do anything, basically, and some extenuating circumstances that we need to learn more about and understand the dollar values involved here, some of the different ranges of costs that we could look at. But I don't want to offer you any hope necessarily, because all we're doing is saying we need to think about this further. We need to look at it. And I hate to do this another time, but if I was forced to make a decision right now and ask and make a motion, I'd say we would make a motion not to pay out anything. But I think we need to examine it further. And I think that's the sentiment I'm getting from the entire council.
And I hope you'll understand that if we took the opposite course and said yes and wrote a check without any legal backing, we would have the same legal liability from all the rest of the residents who would say,
Sure.
Why'd you do that?
Mm-hmm.
No, I want you to do your due diligence, but, like I say, come out and see it and take it from both sides.
Thank you. We will.
I think I'll put that into the record. Mr. Gregory has been out there, but we should all make a point of taking a good hard
we'd
look at your
we'd
property.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
What's the time frame?
I'll make a motion right now that we table this until the next meeting. Give us 2 more weeks, please. I mean, well, I'd like it 2 more weeks. Kara, is that time for you?
Yeah, that should work.
Is that okay?
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, I'm concerned that we're gonna spend money with our engineer to look at the design of a storm sewer now, when I don't think anybody's interested in that. I understand determining the cost of the storm sewer when it might have been put in, but there's no reason to figure out what it would cost to rebuild all the roads and put.
It's a good point.
But you don't have to do the whole design, just we have to have the starting point as to, all right, here's what it would have cost then.
But I think that's the only relevant number that you need, that I can see.
I do need to understand a ballpark.
I think we're looking for an order of magnitude is what the term would be.
I know it's not another $5,000. If it's $25,000 to put a pipe in, is it another $5,000 to do the road, or is it another $75,000? I'm trying to understand that order of magnitude.
Okay,
I think we need to, we need some.
Don't do a design.
Yeah. Decision level cost estimate, not detailed engineering design is what I think I'm supposed to do.
Can you ballpark us on what your time will cost to prepare that? How many zeros are after that number?
$500.
So we just made a decision to postpone it. Do we need a formal motion?
Yeah, I need to, or one of us does, and I will
Yeah.
do it. This is item 7A. I move we table item 7A until the next council meeting.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those against? Motion carries.
Thank you for coming.
Next item of business is the Lake Zumbra issue. Is that going to be?
That's me. Mayor and council, the next item on the agenda that I'll be talking through is the Lake Zumbra flooding issue. You have background in your packet, and I don't intend to spend a great amount of time going into detail on this issue. Residents from the Lake Association have addressed the City Council on this issue historically, and it's been sort of ongoing, a known issue in the city since 2014 when there was some significant flooding. So I'm just going to walk you through a tiny little bit of background and then cover why this is on the agenda tonight for discussion. And we're not looking for any specific council action, rather just some staff direction. So the figure on the left shows the Lake Zumbra area. So here is Lake Zumbra. This is located up on the north end of the city. Highway 7 runs along the north side of Lake Zumbra. Lake Minnetonka is to the north of here. So this red area is the drainage area associated with Lake Zumbra. Lake Zumbra flows, I'm going to show you over here on the right, drains through Sunny Lake, through an unnamed wetland, and eventually into Lake Auburn. What's unique about this watershed is that this whole blue area drains into Sunny, and what happens to Lake Zumbra in a high rain event, but many rain events, is that Lake Zumbra actually floods because this drainage area backs up into Lake Zumbra. So, often you'll see flooding as a result of drainage within a lake subwatershed, but in the case of this broader area, Sunny actually backs up into Lake Zumbra. So it is a unique, complicated system. I'm oversimplifying the heck out of the system, but the residents could give you a very lengthy presentation on the way the system works. Included in your packet is a detailed summary memo that was put together by the Watershed District that has a whole lot of history on this matter as well for background. In 2014 was when the City of Victoria became first really actively involved in flooding with Lake Zumbra. So there was, if you recall, we had a pretty heavy rainfall year that year, and ended up with firefighters and public works staff doing a whole lot of sandbagging in this neighborhood to try to prevent houses from flooding. 3 different properties actually had the lake backed into their house. There was another property with damage due to seepage from groundwater back into their house. This is a park in the neighborhood that flooded and then backed up into this house. And then there was landscape damage really all the way around all of the properties on the lake. The ones highlighted in yellow were the ones that were reported to the city as damage when we were doing a collect for information to provide to FEMA. So, there's been a lot of meetings and a lot of conversation between 2014 and today. There's actually a cross-agency partnership group that's been formed with the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District, Three Rivers Park District, Carver County, the City of Victoria, Zumbra property owners, and the DNR. What's particularly unique about everything that's going on back on this map is all of this property is owned by Three Rivers Park District. So the source of the water that's then backing up into Lake Zumbra is primarily occurring on land that's owned and operated by Three Rivers Park District, Carver Park Reserve, also known as. So the cross-agency group has spent a lot of time and energy studying the problem, trying to understand what types of options might exist to reduce the flood risk on the properties around Lake Zumbra. Lots of different meetings, lots of different discussion, many of which felt like they weren't frankly going anywhere. On December 6th, the city hosted a neighborhood meeting here with all of those agency partners. It was a very well-attended meeting. The end result of that was that we were all going to stop doing studies and just get in a room together and start trying to work through viable solutions instead of just talking about solutions. So the agency group met with the representatives from the Lake Association, so 3 members representing the Lake Association have now had 2 meetings to start to vet through possible projects to reduce the flood risk to Lake Zumbra. And the first project that the residents are interested in seeing move forward is shown on this next slide. So to orient you, we are talking about a project that would run from Sunny down to Lake Auburn. So the map I'm about to show you is a blow up of this section between culverts 2 and 3. So Zumbra's up here from 2 to 3. So essentially this water all needs to flow through this part of the system, and it runs through an existing channel that is very vegetated, very full of sediment, doesn't really effectively flow. It appears that members of the Lake Association were not able to attend tonight, and I know the mayor's had an opportunity to walk this extensively, but if either of those groups were here to speak about it, essentially water isn't really flowing all that freely through this system anymore because just over time it fills in with sediment, it fills in with debris, it fills in with brush. So the first project that's been identified as needing to be considered would consist of essentially looking at dredging the channel in these areas shown in red. The area shown in green would consist of simply a vegetation removal project, so removal of cattails, not any actual dredging of settlement, just getting all the debris out. And then some sediment removal on either side of a culvert that runs under County Road 11. A good example of what they'll describe when they're talking about it is there's a big giant tree that fell over in this area that acts as a dam, and then you'll have all this vegetation and sediment that starts to just build up from this point forward. That type of scenario exists throughout the whole entire system. So the cross-agency group concluded that this could be a possible project that has the ability to be permitted. In going through all of these issues, permitting in this type of work is extremely complicated. And so one of the first questions was an initial screen to see whether a project like this could be permitted if it was to move forward. And that hurdle was generally noted as being something that could be overcome. But the other challenge with this is the financial challenge of paying for a project such as this. So initial ballpark estimates put the project cost starting in the range of $60,000 to $100,000. That really has to do, that range comes from whether or not the sediment can be disposed of on site or whether it needs to be hauled off site. That wouldn't be determined until some initial design work was completed. But essentially, the conclusion was that the partners were all interested in pursuing the project, but would only do so if we were essentially all in this together. So if there was interest by all the parties in participating in the project cost, so Three Rivers Park District, Minnehaha Creek Watershed District, Carver County, the City of Victoria, and the Zumbra Ridge property owners, the consensus from staff in attendance was that if this was pursued as a joint project where we were all participating in the project cost, it had a chance of actually getting funded and constructed. The proposed schedule would be to complete the improvements in 2018-19. So that winter, it's too late to do that work this year with the fact that it's already January and we have to come up with some cross means to fund this thing. And so we decided that we would start with the city council first to see if the city council, if at a council level there was support for participating and funding these improvements. We don't have a specific dollar amount in mind that we would be contributing or that we've been asked for at this point, but rather just is the council interested in participating? And so we're here tonight to get some feedback on that question. Staff's recommendation is that the city consider participating. So we would be asking the council to direct staff to evaluate potential funding sources and levels of city participation in the project. So what that would entail would be sitting down with the finance department and the public works department to see what funding we might have available in 2018 or 2019 to contribute to this project. And if so, how much would we consider contributing? With that, I'll stop talking and take questions. And do my best without the other experts in the room.
Can you put the maps back up there, please? Thank you. So, with the benefit of the previous map showing the roadways, it seems that the natural flow, before mankind was disrupted by, it looks like there's two different roads. One runs kind of through around the south side of Zumbra, and then County Road 11. Is that?
Yes, this is actually a trail, but a trail and then the county road.
So the trail crossing, is that done as a bridge or a boardwalk, or is it?
Culvert.
A culvert, okay. So clearly the issue, I shouldn't say clearly, it would appear to me that there is a man-made element to this problem. It's not just evolution of the natural flow being changed because of natural growth and
There's a whole lot of debate around the answer to that question.
And what's your considered professional opinion?
I've elected to not put a bunch of time diving into the hydrology. There's a lot of which came first, the road culvert or the houses, and who's to blame, and a lot of this stuff dates back to the 60s and 70s. I will tell you it's a fairly complex system, but the biggest issue is that it's really, really flat. From my perspective, the system as a whole is very flat and rainfall is increasing. So the combination of those two things with a system that's clearly hasn't been maintained. I mean, when you have a channel system that hasn't been maintained and is clearly causing blockages that what they describe right now, and again, they would do a much better job than me at doing it, the residents monitor the lake levels essentially daily, and they used to see the water draw down much more quickly than it does now. It like hits an elevation and won't get any lower. It just stops decreasing, and getting that channel cleaned out, they believe, would help the water drain better than it does, which the cross-agency group all agrees that that would be an appropriate step.
And so, and that's really what kind of the crux of this is if there is a natural component to it, or if this is a matter of maintenance that was deferred or neglected. And then, so part of the solution, or part of my answer would be, if this doesn't solve the problem, kind of what's next? And then the other part of that is the go forward maintenance responsibility, so we don't end up back here in 5 or 10 years again.
So those are actually great questions. It is important to note that what's described here is the initial maintenance short-term solution. The group as a whole is still evaluating whether there should be a longer-term change in the hydrology of the system. So an example of that would be changing the culvert under County Road 11. Should the culvert under County Road 11 be larger? Should there be 2 culverts? Should it be configured differently? And the talk about a solution related to that culvert would be the county has a mill and overlay project planned for that road a few years out, so wanting to understand what that culvert change should be before the county comes in and do a road improvement project, so that that solution could be incorporated into a road project. That would be one example.
And that would be good in the sense that if we did this initial maintenance, we would have a couple years to observe before having to make that decision.
Correct. And I don't know whether the residents will be willing to wait a few years to make that decision. That process of evaluating what changes in the hydraulics that should be considered is going to continue to be ongoing over the next few months. The group has committed to finally meeting frequently and regularly to gain understanding of each side's technical information. So part of the challenge has been that the residents don't feel that the model that's been provided by the watershed district is accurate. And so we're arguing over how a system works based off of a model that everybody doesn't agree is correct.
The maintenance that should have been taking place that wasn't taking place, who should have done that maintenance? I'm trying to understand how the city of Victoria gets into controlling water levels in a watershed this big.
So the city has no jurisdictional authority over this issue. The city's role is solely related to emergency management in
Right.
terms of what the city does in this case.
So the city is
But you have 51 property owners requesting that the city council consider participating in this solution.
Right.
See, and from that perspective, I think there's an opportunity to kind of change how we look at this. And I think to each of your points so far, going down the path of whose responsibility is it and who should pay for it is not going to resolve nor end up with a solution that any of us are happy with. And so I come back to the model that we started to go down, or that we have started with Shuts Lake. And that is that, you know what, there's an opportunity to learn something here. We do have some funds. We can find some funds for stormwater. In this case, I'm paraphrasing what we did for Shuts Lake. And the worst case is that we're going to learn something. And the best case is we actually make an effect. And part of what we're trying to learn is how can we benefit, improve the water flow, and improve the water quality throughout the city of Victoria. We have a group of willing participants that have the same objective. So my mindset at this point is that I'm in favor of going forward with this, knowing that we don't know what this is yet, but that we have a group of people that are willing to experiment, and we want to find some funds that can help us improve the water quality and at the same time address the water level issues within the lake. And so my ask is, let's put the group together and see what we can come up with. But I want to come away from this project with okay, we either addressed the water levels or not, but here's how we can improve the water quality throughout this entire system. And some of that I know has to do with the flow of water. When it's not flowing, we're not getting it's not cleaning as it's going through, and it's getting backed up. So there is an opportunity here to address water quality, which is an issue. So if we can tie these things together, I think we can come up with a project that is something we all contribute a little bit to, and we learn and maybe apply some of these things down the road as we get further into the stormwater situation.
So you're looking at this as a water quality
Yes.
issue, not so much a flooding issue.
Yes.
Water quality, stormwater,
They're one and the same.
or you're looking at it broadly.
Yes.
Are they the same though? I tend to think of flow or increasing flow rates as less settling time and therefore reduced water quality, but I'm more thinking about the natural flow than.
I agree with you, and I'm going to smile and say that, yep, I'm a water expert, and I know exactly what I'm saying, and I don't. But what I'm saying is, or what I want to say, and I'll say it again, I'll say it in a different way. I think there's an opportunity to look at this from a water quality perspective, and if we do so, there's a benefit for everybody. Maybe we do that.
Well, and don't get me wrong, I think we need to be involved in this, but not as a single point of action.
Right.
And,
Correct.
what happens to Lake Auburn now?
So that's part of that broader what's a hydraulic solution question is if you increase the culverts under County Road 11, what happens to Lake Auburn? One of the other options that was explored that's in the memo that is in your packet is the idea of adding essentially a flap gate to the culvert between Sunny and the wetland, or between Sunny and Zumbra, that could be closed during a high water condition to prevent this water from continuing to back up into the system. That's one of the options that will continue to be evaluated once we get consensus that the model's correct.
I mean, what seems obvious is the maintenance has to happen.
Correct. Yeah, and that was the consensus from the agency group, was that the maintenance needs to happen. I don't know that I am in a position to say that. I don't know what Three Rivers Park District schedule should be for maintaining a natural channel through their property, what sort of maintenance schedule it should look like. To one of the questions you noted earlier, the group is discussing putting in protocols in place to outline who's responsible, what the expectations are of Three Rivers Park District going forward from an inspection and
So if out of this project, we understand that, you know what, this needs to be maintained every 6 months or every 5 years, that's a good thing, because right now we don't know.
Yep.
So, again, I come back to, let's go forward and figure something out.
And I think there was definite consensus that nobody was in a position to be the lead funder, the lead.
There's no lead here. It's about who's
We've got to work together and
Exactly.
creating this partnership of willing funders.
I agree. I think I'm ready to move forward with this too. We've got 5 groups that possibly are willing to participate and pay for this. I think we're going to learn something. Sitting back and waiting for another event like we had, what was it, 2014, where we had to have our fire department out there for I don't know how long and what that cost the city. And then there was tens of thousands of dollars worth of property damage. Probably, I think we saw a list, possibly hundreds of thousands.
But the project costs start in the 60 to 100
It
range.
starts, but we're going to learn something as we go through with this, and I think it's a good starting point.
So, kind of to that, okay, now how do we move forward? And maybe who moves forward? I think I also heard some discussion from the property owners, maybe Mr. Hawley at the last meeting on this. There was some improvements made to Highway 7, curb and gutter on the north side, but not on the south side. I think there was some opinions that it increased the actual inflow directly to Zumbra, where it abuts Highway 7. And so I guess part of my question is, can we drag the DOT in here and have them help be part of the solution? And again, it's a county road that's going underneath County Road 11 over on that side. So are there other agencies that can be part of this solution as well?
I think in terms of related to this specific project, I think the listed partners would apply here, but the residents are in continued dialogue with MnDOT about Highway 7 and know to involve us when they feel they need to involve us in those discussions.
I think the Highway 7 was water quality related, salt getting
Absolutely.
into the lake.
Well, and there was pretty significant erosion off the side of the highway, so they had to put an emergency stopgap up in place because there was concern about how much the road was going to start to erode. And the last update I had from the residents on it, MnDOT was trying to come up with what the long-term solution would be for that section of road, and it might involve storm sewer and whatnot. I haven't gotten an update from them on that in a bit.
And my last comment or question is this the kind of project that there's an argument for assessing the directly benefiting property owners?
That's certainly something that we could look at as we're going through the process, but to the extent that the Zumbra property owners are also talking about participating themselves in contributing dollars, I know they're discussing that among themselves, how they can play a role here. That would all
Part of the negotiation.
continue to be part of the discussion.
Okay. Thank you.
So I think we have agreement that we would like to participate.
I don't need a motion, but this is, if I'm seeing head nods to this effect, then we will
Yeah.
proceed accordingly.
To the recommendation up here.
Next on the agenda is the downtown infrastructure update, and that's Kara.
Mr. Mayor, could I speak to this for just a sec? Because this project does involve major street construction in front of my home, I thought I should probably recuse myself, even though it is somewhat conceptual. So I'm going to recuse myself, but whether this is appropriate or not, but I just wanted to make clear that if we do have developers that do come forward for the Downtown West, I do plan on participating in that, and if any council members feel that maybe I shouldn't be, maybe I'm conflicted, because the reason that I would be conflicted in some people's minds is that my home, located right there at 1885, is between our current downtown east and our proposed downtown west location, and there's been some discussion that maybe I should recuse myself because of that, because of my home is in that proximity. But with that argument in mind, I've lived there for 30 years. The city acquired the 13 acres more than 10 years ago with the express purpose of redeveloping it as our a commercial, an extension of our downtown. So with that in mind, I think if I were to recuse myself for downtown west, my home is actually closer to downtown east, and with that logic, I'd have to recuse myself for pretty much the entire central business district, and I don't think the residents that put me in this seat would want me to do that. So with that in mind, if the council wants to discuss possible conflict of interest, I'm more than willing to have that discussion now, but I don't want to have it, I don't want to wait for a developer to come and then we have that at that time. That's inappropriate. So,
Any comments by the rest of the council? Any feelings, observations?
I commend Mr. Gregory for making that decision.
okay, I will recuse myself from this discussion.
Very good.
Okay, back in late 2016, the City Council authorized preliminary design for what we referred to as the Downtown West Infrastructure Improvement Project. The limits of that project were based on the Downtown Master Plan shown here in this graphic. So essentially the project limits were from the Steiger Lake Lane Bridge out to County Road 11 through the 13.5 acres. So along the existing Steiger Lake Lane. So currently Steiger Lake Lane runs through here to Highway 5, but under the Downtown Master Plan and plans that existed through the acquisition of the 13.5 acres, Steiger Lake Lane was to be rerouted up through the development and out to County Road 11. So the purpose of preliminary design was really to get into the preliminary engineering for this master plan. So the master planners came up with a pretty road alignment, but we needed to turn it over to engineering to determine if it was a viable road alignment and start looking at grading of the site, stormwater management of the site, utility extensions, so that we could come up with actual detailed cost estimates to help people determine how best to move forward with development. At the time, the city was also deciding whether we would contemplate taking the lead on constructing some of those improvements. In order to be able to answer that question, we needed better cost estimates associated with the project. We also took a look at project phasing, developed refined details, and took the opportunity to coordinate with agencies that would need to permit the project. So Highway 5 would be MnDOT, County Road 11 would be Carver County, and then of course the Watershed District would have a role in permitting any sort of approval on the project. So what we wanted to do tonight was to just provide an update to the City Council. We're not looking for any council action. We're not at this time recommending we move forward with final design or anything. But we do have a suite of documents that are now available that have been included in your agenda item and would essentially serve as a package to provide to developers who are interested in the property. So I'm not going to go into great detail about the preliminary design, but I am going to highlight a few items. So this first slide, which was included in the packet of information, just shows the refined concept alignment. Now, to many people, it's going to feel like the roadway alignment is very similar to what's here, but there was a lot of time and energy put into laying out where the parking bays would be, what the exact roundabout configuration would look like, what these curves are, where retaining walls would be needed along the existing portion of Steiger Lake Lane. Also looking at all the grades, preliminary profile for the roadway as well as grades for the road. Trail alignment, I skipped an agency for coordination. We also spent a bunch of time with Three Rivers Park District working on a trail alignment for getting the trail through this area. So there aren't any major changes really from what we found in the master plan, except that in the master plan we had contemplated a right-in, right-out. Through ongoing dialogue with MnDOT, the conclusion is that we won't be allowed a right-out, we will only be allowed a right-in. So that is incorporated into this final graphic for what would be allowed. Also included in the packet of information that you have are utility layouts. So how would we extend city water to the property? How would we extend city sewer? There were a couple of different options for extending city sewer, so we worked through what made the most sense from a phasing perspective and laid that out. The consultant also took a very close look at stormwater management, found that there is a wetland located at this location. Started the process of being able to potentially fill that wetland should a project move forward. It really doesn't make sense to have an actual wetland in this location. We would rather have a pond. Came up with some preliminary storm sewer layout, stormwater ponding sites. So there's a whole memo related to stormwater management in your packet. Another big component of the work that occurred during preliminary design was the downtown streetscape standards booklet that I included with the agenda packet. So this draft booklet starts to lay out what the expectations might be for what the streetscape package would look like through this area. So included in the packet are some detailed illustrations of the areas in question, some cross sections, so what the roadway width would look like, what the parking bay width should be, what the trail width should be, how this roadway would sit compared to buildings and the stormwater management features, So that conceptual information is all included and now available. And then the last piece was really to be able to get to some updated cost projections. Before, we'd been working off of just these sort of really speculative costs without a real clear picture of what the project costs might be. So our consultant did put together these construction cost estimates for the construction costs. So the west end refers to this area in red. So really the work that would occur within the 13.5 acres. The east end refers to the reconstructed portion of Steiger Lake Lane. These projects potentially would be, should they move forward, would be funded through potentially different scenarios. You might have a developer construct all of these westerly improvements as part of a development project, where the city would likely need to take the lead on the reconstruction of the existing portion of Steiger Lake Lane, since that's an existing roadway. So the costs are broken down into those two sections, with the west end costs being roughly $3.2 million in construction, and the east end costs being about $1.2 million. So with that, what we did was we essentially created an information package that could be available to interested developers. What would be included in those documents was included in your agenda tonight. So there's a design memo from the engineer who completed preliminary design, which really would provide some great technical background for somebody taking a closer look at the site. We have the figures shown, also preliminary design layout, so plan and profile for the roadways, the detailed stormwater management plan, some background on the trail alignments and why we picked where we picked. Geotechnical report, which actually was completed prior to this preliminary design phase work, but is still useful information to a developer, the streetscape guidelines, and then the cost estimates. So staff will continue to provide this information to any developers that are interested along the way. And with that, that's all I intended to cover, but certainly could go into any area of detail that the council's interested in talking about more. Otherwise, we will just have Aaron provide an update on where we are with developers, and we will just continue to make this information available.
I think it's good we have this information, especially if we're going to be talking to developers soon, especially the cost information.
This is, if I understand, consistent and continuing from the work that Ben and you, Aaron, and did with, was it Hoisington Kogler initially, to give us a marketing development package for developers. So
Correct.
I like
we really we got the final design memo in the end of December, so we wanted to at least have an opportunity to make sure the council was aware that this preliminary phase of work has essentially been completed and is now available.
So on that note, anything that we'd approve for funding is complete? Funding the design work and the study and all that?
Correct.
That's
Yes,
complete?
that is
So,
correct.
in the absence of something to move us forward, this is kind of finished, completed state.
That's correct.
Any further discussion before we go to Aaron?
Mayor and Council, if you'll recall, Tim Nichols that we've seen in May of 2016 and then April of this past year is hoping to come before the council in February with an update on the 13.5 acres with that co-op housing project that he's been working on, possibly partnering with a grocer as well as the CDA for some affordable senior housing. I spoke with Tim today, and he's really excited to be in front of you again, and he's looking forward to hopefully building a relationship with the city. So that will be in February as a workshop.
So would we be looking at the same concept that we've looked at before?
He hasn't
Supermarket.
submitted any plans at this time. I suspect it would be similar, but I can't say if it's exactly the same.
Yeah, I think one of the potential sticking points in the past was that there was, if I'm thinking of the correct project, he was thinking about the city being a landlord in some respect, having some ownership, and then leasing some of the mixed-use space for retailers of some variety. And I think that was a bit of a challenge for us last time we had that conversation. So hopefully we've made some progress on that point.
And I suspect I will be speaking with Tim in the next couple of days, so if you have other feedback that you would like to have addressed, this would probably be a good time to talk about some of those issues, and not only related to his project, but other potential projects too.
Are our friends at CDA still out there in terms of being somewhat involved with us?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, I think I'm speaking personally, I'm excited to see something start to become firm and move forward. So look forward to seeing Mr. Nichols.
I do too.
Yes, I am as well, and I have reached out to another developer, and they do seem somewhat interested. Just checked in with them today, and they are going to try to put together a little bit of a site plan. So hopefully, maybe we can even have 2 people come forward next month.
Any further discussion? No more comments? Okay, we'll move to the next item of the agenda, which is citizen survey with Doug.
Mr. Mayor, every 3 or 4 years, the city does a city survey to get a reading on the interests of the citizens on various matters. We presented to the council at the last meeting some questions that we wanted to refine. We only have a few questions that are geared totally toward the city of Victoria. The rest of them are general questions which allow us to compare Victoria to other cities in the country and to see how we stack up. What we asked the council tonight is to look at those questions that we came up with, 14 through 19, that were in your packet, and to see if you are comfortable with those, and if so, we can get those back to the survey people and start the survey process. The survey would actually start mailing out surveys in February. This says February 16th, so that's the time frame we're looking at. But in order to get that ready to go, we need to have your final sign off on the questions, all the questions, but the main questions we were designing for Victoria were the questions 14 through 19, which deal with trails and parking lots. So we're looking for your comments on those questions tonight.
So it's 14, or is it 14, 15, and 16?
14 through 19.
All the way through 19.
But
I know it's always been a lightning rod, but on question 14, the last one, a grocery store, I'm always a little bit troubled by this because the city's not a property developer, we're not a business operator. Of course, we would want to see, we'd like to see, I think everybody pretty unanimously would like to see a grocery store here. I'm just not sure what the city's role is in that specifically.
well,
As a specific item. I mean, all the other ones are more general in nature, but that one's a private business.
well, and related to that, there's an alley going into Waconia. I think there's one in Chanhassen and a Hy-Vee coming too, and I would love to have a grocery store in Victoria, but with all those things going on, I'm wondering how realistic that is that's serious competition. That being said, it's not our place to say whether you come to Victoria or not with a grocery store. That's for the business owner to pursue.
I mean, to the extent that we have some outreach to retailers, to ask them to consider us, I think, sure. But as far as something that the city would invest in or in some way have some kind of a financial role, I don't see that.
Mr. Mayor, I don't think that's the way that question's directed. I think it's the question to try to measure how important is it that your staff spend time to try to do something to get a grocery store here. Is that an important amenity? It would be similar to whether you want a bank here or something else, because I think staff
So
can
given,
reach out to some extent, but that doesn't mean we're going to reach out financially.
I think it's appropriate, but it's tied, first of all, it's tied, both the grocery store and the senior housing, we wouldn't be in that business either, are tied to the 13.5 acres. So if we want, my feeling is that both the grocery store and the senior housing are appropriate for the survey, but somehow the wording here should somehow be tied to the 13.5 acres. And not that it would have to be, but to make the 13.5 acres viable, we need something to put on it. And right now, the best ideas were a supermarket and senior housing.
given the dynamics of the market that I just described, maybe the question to ask is, do you still want a grocery store in Victoria?
Well, or maybe more importantly, in the absence of one, are you going to withhold approval for a project for that area?
All of which
You
will,
try and reserve space for, and I don't, so, I mean.
all of which will probably have to be answered before you get the answers to the survey.
I think based on our what we've been working on the comp plan and the social pinpoint, grocery store comes up, it is top of everyone's list. So I don't think, if this is on in the survey, I don't think we're going to be surprised by the results.
I think it's still going to be rated highly.
That's what I mean. It's
I agree.
we're not going to be surprised.
If I can speak to that, Mr. Mayor, something to think about too is some of the answers to these questions become marketing for us. That if a grocer were to approach staff, we could say X amount of people said.
Exactly.
This is harder data than what's gathered in some of like the social pinpoint where we can't track it as closely. So this provides us with some of that hard statistical data.
I think the same goes for the senior housing.
That was a very good point.
If you're gonna get somebody to help us with the senior housing, they should know that we want it, that our people want it.
I'm fine
Fair
with the
enough.
questions.
Right.
So I'm fine with 14, 15,
With 15 in regards to parking, I just threw out a question that and whether the council would like to either consider it or reword it. But I worded it as such: explore cost-sharing solution between the downtown property owners and the city's general fund, similar to our 50% rule for street assessments.
So I like the concept, but from a statistical standpoint, having something specific in there around that might pose a challenge. But if there's a way to gather more information, I mean, we already have comments from people that are saying they are in favor of that. To Aaron's point, that if we have statistical evidence now that there's interest as to how we approach that, that's something to be decided down the road, I'd be in favor of that.
Would it kind of hit both points to change what was that, 1, 2, 3,
The 1%.
fourth one that says issue debt to basically be reworded to say something about exploring different financing or financial solutions to the parking problem?
Well, you could say issue debt and or explore joint solutions, joint funding solutions. Would that be acceptable?
Yeah, between, and the solution being between property owners and,
Yeah,
okay.
just changing that one question to reflect both opportunities.
that sounds good. I would suggest a minor change on the second one, build a low-profile, 2-level parking deck on the site. I don't think we've ever talked about a parking ramp.
Yeah, call it a deck. Good idea.
It's a deck, it doesn't have ramps.
Lower level, you go in on the lower level, upper level, you go in on the upper level.
Right.
You know.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Number 16, we're talking about trail connections. One of the trail connections that, I don't know if it should be in the survey, but I want to bring it up. We're going to need some really good trail connections if we ever want to make the Waterman Park viable. Or what did I say? The Wasserman Park viable.
It's already connected
No,
to Deer Run anyway.
to Deer Run.
It ends at Deer Run.
Yeah. So we need connections, especially to the neighborhoods to the north along 43. Those are all going to be very complicated, expensive connections. And, we can not put it in here and leave it with buried in the total park puzzle. But to me, that's going to be a big one if we ever get to be to the point of having that Wasserman Park viable. The connections are going to be a big deal.
So what's the timing of that park? 2 years?
Based on my initial thoughts, it could be 2 to 10.
2 to 10?
It might need to be phased in over a period of time.
So, I agree with you, Mr. Mayor, but I don't think Wasserman Park is the driving point. And so I said that kind of tongue-in-cheek that Deer Run is connected to it. The issue is Deer Run isn't connected across County Road 11, and other parts of the city aren't connected together, and it's how do we need to, I want to try to emphasize it's the connection to the system, and if the system is right, connection to Wasserman Park will fall out of that.
Yeah, we have all kinds of park connections that aren't listed here. I'll give you another example. If you're in the Watermark neighborhood and you want to go from the Watermark neighborhood to Victoria Drive and go somewhere into town, the trail is ambles nicely along County Road 43 and just abruptly stops. So you have about half mile, 3/4 of a mile where you get back, you walk along County Road 43, which is dangerous.
It's a fairly narrow shoulder.
And you could probably find about a half dozen of those.
So to kind of to piggyback on your point, I think the challenge that I have, I think these are important questions. The challenge that I have is if you live right immediately in the area of one of these, you understand what it means and how it connects.
Yes.
But in the absence of that, you don't know if this serves 20 people or 2,000, right? And so how do we make it clear in the asking of these questions, what are the major connectivities that each one of these segments provides?
Can we expand this question to additional options?
Mr. Mayor, I think my understanding was that in the current financial plan, you only get 3 choices here.
Well, I guess what I'm thinking of, is there a way that if there are 8, picking a number, connections that we've heard are important, it would be helpful to have those ranked by the citizens. So if we could put more in and have them ranked, and my question here, I think these are important personally, but to have data that says the statistically significant number of citizens agree that those are the top 3. But knowing those are the top 3, you immediately narrow it, those are the only ones we're going to learn about.
Okay, I can certainly answer that question. I don't think it's, I assume we can come up with more choices. Okay.
Well, and again, I think
We'll bring those back to you.
I think the votes you're going to get are going to be relative to the people who live in that proximity, and
I also think we
struggle with that a little bit.
we run the risk of alienating people that look at these as like, well, what about my trail? What
Right.
about my place?
Well, and I'm not suggesting, Doug, either that you come back to us for approval, and just try to expand it and gather as much data as possible. Unless the council wants you to come back, I'm not asking you to do that.
Fine, we'll tell you what we came up with, and you'll have time to tell me no before they start printing it. And I'll try to get a number to you also. I really don't have an idea what that is.
And again, if there's some way to just say this connects Lions Park to the rec center or something of that nature that people can get a sort of a, what's the relative value, that would be helpful. I don't know if that gets too complicated, but if you could.
A little bit of that thought is in question number 17. It asks you what kinds of things do you want to put together.
Any further discussion?
I have just, the one thing that they did say is if we expand it and it goes into another page, then it becomes more expensive. So we have to take out a question if we want to get to 8 options on that one. So
Got it.
that was,
And how much is that?
probably 1,800, I'm not sure.
$1,800 more?
I think so.
Or a question?
If it gets into another page, that's why originally it was gonna be 14 through 16, but with the way we worded those questions, they were able to get it on that page. So it became 14 through 19 that you have choices on.
So let me respond with a question. What's the value of having statistically significant data that says these are the top whatever number of trails versus spending $1,800?
We're gonna spend hundreds of thousands, if not
My
millions.
guess is it's
on
worth spending
trails.
$1,800 more.
We'll get back to you.
But
Next
it's a good
item on
point.
the
Thank you
agenda.
for bringing that up.
19 could get 1 line instead of 2, or
Yeah.
there may be ways to.
Reports by the city manager, of the city manager.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to touch base first with a couple of the correspondence items. Can we put those on the screen or not, Aaron? Not the first one, the second, the second two, yeah. One of the most important things that the city does, of course, is try to keep track of our money, and this city for the last 10 years has received an award from the Governmental Finance Officers Association. We did again this year for our work in 2016 for putting out an outstanding audit report at the end of the year for 16. And you've had that for the last 10 years. And then the second award that we have recently been made aware of is the popular annual financial report, which is a readable financial report as opposed to the other one that we put out every year. And we've received an award for that also. So I think it's a sign that you're finding, and we've received that report for the last, since 2010. So what you have is a finance department that's produced some outstanding work for this city, and not all cities get that. So I just wanted to make sure that you realize that you're getting that kind of work by your staff, and I anticipate you'll have the same thing for 17. We haven't started on that, of course, but I'm sure we'll be there. And then, Mr. Mayor, I also wanted to ask the council under my reports if on January 22nd, we have a joint meeting with the Planning Commission and the Park and Rec Commission, which starts at 5:30. We don't think that's going to be finished by 6:30, so we'd like to ask you to pass a motion tonight to start the council meeting at 7 o'clock rather than 6:30, if you would.
What date is that? January
22nd.
January 22nd.
Do I have a motion to start the council meeting on January 22nd at 7 p.m. instead of 6:30 p.m.? I can make that motion. I will make a motion to start the January 22nd council meeting at 7 p.m.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All against? Hearing none, motion passes.
Mr. Mayor, finally, I want to talk about a request that you consider sending a letter to, what county am I in? Carver County, to concern about the brush waste yard site that they are proposing on Arboretum property. I've drafted up a copy of that letter for you. Basically, it requests that they maybe keep looking at other sites, but it specifically asks them to have a, that, well, it specifically, well, I don't know if you want to put that.
Mr.
Go ahead. Here's the
Manager, City Manager, I think you had this in your list of reports before the proposed county brush and yard waste disposal site was put on the agenda. So would this fit better if we talked about this letter when we get to the next subject, which is the...
Yeah, okay, I think I assumed I was still on, but go ahead. There's nothing else between that and where we're at.
It's a new item on the agenda.
Did we get?
And it is a part of the report of the city manager.
It's a report of the city manager, but there are 3 things and they're all related.
Oh, I see, okay. Excuse me, sir.
There are 4 things and they're all
Okay,
related.
so I think you're all familiar with, you can see on the map here where they're proposing to put it. Our concern is that it's on a dirt road, creates dust, the road needs to be kept plowed, and we're concerned about the people dropping off materials there when this thing is closed, because it's only proposed to be open on certain days. So we're suggesting that you may want to voice those concerns to the county.
I'll comment on that. I think this is a bad idea as a minimum, placing this here at this time, given the condition of the road and the intersection. But I'm not sure that under any circumstances it's a great place for it. 3 out of the 4 corners of that intersection are residential. And so I think there could be a better site. And again, I don't know what the Arboretum's financial considerations are, but I have to believe that there's a better place. And so I would support taking an official city position against this facility in that location. I would also be interested to hear, and maybe the Director of Public Works could comment, we have a facility that was oversized for the immediate needs just down Bavaria Road, the Public Works Department, that I think we occupy about 1/3 to 1/2 of it. I wonder if that couldn't be a more suitable place. We've already got the traffic in and out of there. It's much less residential impact. And I don't know what that might all include, but I would be interested to see if that's a site that could serve that purpose with less impact on the residential areas.
Ann, you want
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. Actually, the Carver County did, and the Arboretum did look at that site with Public Works. Some of our concerns, immediate concerns with that site, again, were traffic, and there is no turn lanes at that location. Also, the driveway in was not necessarily built to city specifications as far as road construction, allowing traffic, a significant amount of traffic, meaning semis, trucks, additional vehicles coming into the site. There would also be some significant grading work that would need to be done to put a road into the Arboretum site, for example, out in the back, because that has not been touched, it's not been graded. So that's just dirt going all the way back to that site. So, and I know that the Arboretum and the county did look at that site extensively and have chosen to not go there either. So,
I mean, I assume any site is going to need some level of improvements made. So, as a partnership, improving the driveway and doing some of the prep work,
yeah.
I would think if they could spend the money in one place, it could be just as well spent in another. But I think the site that they proposed is inappropriate. So if this one's not better, then keep looking, I guess, is my answer.
I think it's kind of funny, the only common thread here is nobody wants this thing. And I don't want it either. My recommendation is to reply to the Mr. Ricks that spoke earlier this weekend It needs to be further west, outside of any of the city limits, and I am in support of the letter that you have here.
I'm in support of the letter, but tongue-in-cheek in the sense that a lot of the discomfort with this is the fact that there'd be a lot of traffic in that intersection and on 82nd Street. And we've discussed several times that 82nd, everyone would like to see 82nd Street paved. And so it would become something that reduces pressure on Highway 5. And if Highway 5 is ever expanded to 4 lanes, it will be the backup road during the construction process. And the timing, we once thought would be 25 years out into the future. That could all be happening a lot sooner. So the heavy traffic or significantly increased traffic to that intersection and to 82nd Street is coming. And it won't be this project that brings it. So, I mean, we have to be careful here. We're doing this because we say we don't want the traffic, but the traffic is coming. So the thing that bothers me about it is I saw at the old site there's significant waiting lines of people trying to get in. I don't know if that would be the case the way this thing is set up, but it would be a little bit disconcerting to have a waiting line of cars and trucks on 82nd Street. If that was designed to be a road of some traffic in the future. So I think the letter is fine, but I think we might be setting people's hopes up too high because on the other hand, we're actively discussing paving 82nd Street.
And that would be an improvement, but I don't think it's enough to make it a suitable site. And I think, strength in numbers. Chaska has already opposed it. I certainly understand the PV Road site congestion, but that doesn't make this the right place, in my opinion. So I still stand by my opposition.
I agree. I'm opposed to it based on the current condition of the road. If they were to make some sort of a commitment to improving that road, I'd be much more inclined to look at it. But until the county is ready to step up and make some sort of a firm commitment on that road, I don't want to say, well, in 5 to 10 years it might get done. That's just not good enough.
So I think we feel the letter is appropriate.
Okay, we'll send it. I don't think I need a motion, I understand.
Okay, thank you.
And resident David Ricks has already spoken. We had his email on the list here. Final little item on the agenda is reports of the mayor, city council, or city attorney, and city attorney. Council?
I have nothing to report.
No report.
Just bringing in the new year, just very much looking forward to 2018. I think it's going to be a great year. We've got a lot of fun things on the plate. We've got a new restaurant coming to town. We're looking at challenging parking issues, but I think we can get there. I think this is going to be the year that the 13 acres gets developed. I'm hopeful and wishing, hoping that happens. Meeting with our new city manager was enjoyable. I think we're in great hands, and I think it's going to be a great year. So, Happy New Year.
Well said. I have a couple of comments. First of all, I have high hopes that the coming year we're going to step forward and work together and create a good atmosphere with the city so we can hire a new city manager. So I'm optimistic that we can put that together and make it happen. Everything else that Councilman Gregory said, I share. There's a lot we can do and we can get done in 2018. The other item on the agenda is the mayor's 2018 vision statement. That statement appeared in the Chanhassen Herald paper this past week. We all received copies of it. As an individual council member, I do not agree with everything the mayor said.
Can I interrupt you, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
Would it make sense to put this onto the packet for the next meeting so that, I mean, normally the individual making the report has
Would be-
the opportunity to present
Exactly.
their positions and opinions, and it's a discussion, and it leads to action items on future agendas. So I guess my thought is to pull this from here and put it into the next packet so that the author can be here to discuss his thoughts.
That sounds reasonable.
Mr. Mayor, could I have one more
Sure.
point? I kind of forgot.
Sure.
I don't know, I'm not sure what the consensus of the council is, but I would like the council to consider putting the sanctions back on the agenda for the next week and give it some consideration whether or not we want to remove those sanctions. I think our interim city manager has enough on his plate. Asking him to oversee and enforce the sanctions, I think, is an undue burden, and I would like the council to consider removing those.
Not at this time.
I haven't seen any change in the conditions that led to those censure and sanctions, so I'm not sure what would be gained by that conversation. I'm opposed to that.
And like I said, I just think that the city manager has enough to do without having to enforce that. I think that's asking a lot, and I think that that was a heavy burden on our previous one, and I don't want it to be a burden on our new city manager, or on our future city manager.
As the person that put those sanctions on in the censure process, I will think further about that. I also will take into consideration the comments of Councilman Striegel and Crowley. So I will just put on the record that we'll move the agenda for the mayor's 2018 vision statement to the next meeting. And I will think about the censure
Very good. That's all I ask.
thing.
Is there a report by the city attorney? I didn't hear.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, I'm not one to be optimistic or not about 2018, but I'm optimistic about it, and I don't have anything to report.
City manager, any further comments?
No, sir.
Welcome aboard, Deb.
Welcome aboard.
Yes.
I would say it's a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to working with you in 18. Not all of 18, but some part of it.
Let's hope that is true. It's been enjoyable so far. So I've been pleasantly delighted with having you here.
I second that.
Do I have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second, anybody?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
No? None heard? Meeting is closed.
Very good.